Hello, I'm Lydia and you're listening to Lens from the Fens. Hello everybody, welcome back to Lens from the Fens. As always, I hope that you are doing well and that we have all been experiencing very cold weather and the vast amounts of snow, especially where I'm living in the Fens. Because of the temperatures staying so low over the past week, the snow has stayed and it's sort of become quite icy, but that certainly hasn't deterred the garden birds from visiting my garden. I have been putting out seed as and when I can. I've also managed to get some of the coconut feeders, which contains like all bits of seed and fat. So they've really been enjoying that. The great tits especially and the blue tits, they've been feeding off of those. There's also a peanut feeder that has been established in the apple tree at the end of my garden. And again, the blue tits have been feeding from that. And the jackdaws have also been trying to get a few mouthfuls from that. As always, the house sparrows that reside in the hedge are constantly chattering, always coming out for food. There's been quite a few male blackbirds within the garden sort of fending off the territory in a way. There was been a couple calling out to each other this morning. And there's always the wood pigeons that come down to get some of the seed that's fallen on the ground. So they're definitely still quite active, even though the temperatures have been quite bad for them. And I'm always trying to make sure that the bird bath is clear and make sure there's no snow on it, and also breaking up and removing any ice that has formed. So it's always worth checking if you've got any bird baths or if you've got like a water bowl down on the ground. It's always worth just checking it's not frozen over and the birds and other wildlife can still have access to it. In the run-up to recording this episode, the laptop was being really slow. So I've had to restart it all and make sure it was all working fine before pressing record. And during that time, I've just witnessed a red kite hovering or flying over the field. And normally, the other corvid birds, like jackdaws or carrion crow, they would normally be trying to fend off the red kite. But the one I just watched now, it was actually chasing a carrion crow over the field. So whether it was just making sure that it didn't get hands on any food, that it was looking out for. So that was quite interesting to watch, just while the laptop was sorting itself out. But yeah, that's pretty much a brief update of what I've been seeing from my garden of when I've been at home. So getting into this episode, if you haven't seen it already, my most recent post that I put out on my social media under my Pinfall Photographic account, it recalls the time where I was photographing puffins for the first time, and there was like a behind the scenes shot of me photographing an individual puffin and then the resulting image that came from that. And it was just nice to reflect back on like a few years ago now, but just going and travelling up and down the country as and when I can. So I thought for this episode I would talk a bit about my home away from home. It's definitely not the Fens, I'll just reiterate that now. But I think because of its contrast to where I live and the amount of wildlife that is local to there, I just thought I'd go a bit more in depth about this place and why it's so special to me, not just for personal reasons, but also for how I've been developing my wildlife photography as well. I have mentioned this location briefly in previous episodes, but on the subject of just remembering going places at this point in time, I thought I'd just talk a bit more about this place with some more detail and what I've experienced. So this location is the Isle of Mull. It is an island which is part of the Inner Hebrides off the west coast of Scotland, and this island is north of the Isle of Islay and southeast of the largest island, which is the Isle of Skye. So I didn't know a lot about the Hebrides itself until my time at college, I think I was researching it for one of my smaller projects, and I was intrigued by its dramatic landscapes, the coastlines, and the huge forests, and even some of the small mountains that are part of the Isle of Mull. I first visited the island back in 2015, so I was still studying at the time, I believe. I obviously didn't have my own mode of transport, so the first time myself and my partner went, we were quite restricted to just public transport, and therefore we couldn't really explore much of the island apart from where we were actually staying. So we stayed in the coastal town of Tobermory, which has an average population of about 1,000 people, and that's pretty much where most of the population of people on this island live. So I was mesmerised by, like I said, the forest that was near the town. We walked there pretty much every other day. And there was also a lot of waterfalls, which were quite a common sight, both within the forest and when I returned a few years later, it was just abundant across the whole island. So, yeah, seeing waterfalls, obviously, we hardly get any waterfalls across the Fens, so they were really nice to see. And we also came across like a tiny abandoned settlement, which was right smack bang in the middle of this forest. It was like a tiny cottage-style house with stone walls. The roof was missing, but the chimney stack was still standing. And there was even like a little fireplace inside, and it was obviously used, if not hundreds of years ago. So that history of people inhabiting that island from that long a time ago, it was really nice to see. One of the most exciting experiences that I had when I first visited the Isle of Mull was going to see the puffin colony. So they don't breed as much on the Isle of Mull. They actually are more accustomed to being on uninhabited islands. So we got a boat out to the Treshnish Isles. One of the largest islands, part of those, is known as Lunga. So as we were travelling there on a small passenger boat, there was multiple seal colonies, mostly consisting of the harbour seals. They were all hauled out on either spits of land or on rock formations that were coming out of the sea. And it was also one of the first times where I saw gannets. I hadn't seen gannets in the wild previously, so that was quite exciting. And we were also able to see from quite a distance away, but we saw a couple of the white-tailed sea eagles that were obviously very, very abundant across the Isle of Mull. So arriving on Lunga, we walked off the boat and we went up a hill to the top of the cliffs. And as soon as we walked along the cliff edge, there was just masses of puffins. I didn't know where to look. They were constantly calling and they were flying everywhere, and it was just amazing. They were coming in with the sand eels for their young, which are known as pufflings, which is really cute. And they were just so relaxed, despite being there quite a number of humans. And I think at that time I took at least over 400 images of these puffins, and as you will see in my most recent post that I put, you could just lay there and they will just happily walk around you. They'd pose for you, which is that individual certainly did. And you can hear the pufflings underground doing like their groaning call to the adults. It was just a whole myriad of sights, sounds, obviously the smell of the sea. And there was also the quite pungent smell of the guillemots that were also colonising on part of the islands. They were mainly on the sea stacks, which were just detached from the island. And there was thousands of them as well. There was young baby guillemots with their adults, and it was just, you couldn't hear anything else when you got to closer to the guillemot colony. But yeah, the experience I had with the puffins for the first time, it's definitely something that I will remember for a long time. I'll just quickly mention the reason that the puffins were so used to there being humans around and them not flying off or, them just sticking around. It's mainly because they have no land predators. So they have nothing to fear when they come onto land. to breed and feed their young. And in fact, humans also provide protection from other birds of prey, because skewers can often prey on puffins or young pufflings. So humans actually act as a deterrent for these larger birds, and therefore the puffins obviously acknowledge that, and they're just happy. If you sit on the ground or you lay on the ground like I did, like I said, the puffins could just walk right up to you. They're obviously quite curious birds, and yeah, I must have been there. I think we stayed on the island for about 2 hours. That is until the boat was ready to leave. So in that 2 hours, it was just amazing. I definitely recommend it for anyone looking to travel there. I don't know, obviously, if this year is going to go ahead for a lot of people, but even if in the next couple of years, if you wish to, the red kite's just come back and it's soaring right over my garden, and a lot of other birds just flew off as well. Oh, that was good. So since my first visit back in 2015, I have returned a couple more times, both with my own transport. So that means I've had more opportunities to actually explore more of the island. So on my second visit to the Isle of Mull, I had a holiday with my mum. So that was really nice because we both enjoyed doing like the nature walks through the forests, and we could obviously do more travelling across the island. So that included travelling to the northernmost point of Mull to see the white sands of Calgary Bay, and then travelling across the west coast. There's a waterfall called Eas Falls, which is basically a waterfall that starts right from the top of the mountain on the west side, and it just cascades down, and then it's probably one of the longest waterfalls on the island, and it just plummets straight down the cliff and then out to the sea. So that's a really nice spot for me because there's like a little lagoon pool. If anyone wanted to maybe do a dip in it, I didn't do it last time, I quite regret it. But I think if I get the chance to visit Eas Falls again, then I'll definitely do a lagoon dip there because it's just a lovely natural surrounding. And yeah, it's just a place I would definitely, again, recommend seeing as like a sightseeing place. I've had a few more boat trips out to see the puffins when I went in the summertime. Again, my mum joined me for one of the boat trips, and we managed to see the white-tailed sea eagles from a distance. We saw golden eagles when we were exploring parts of the island. But it was actually the first time that I and my mum had seen harbour porpoises. So they're really quite elusive. When they come up for air, they're only up for about a second. So you just see a tiny little speck of the fin coming out the water, and that would be it. But there'd be quite a large group of them, so they were always popping up and then diving back down, which was really nice to see. And then when we were heading out past the seal colony again, we then came across a feeding minke whale, which again, I'd never seen a minke whale before. So yeah, just seeing it feed, it was obviously quite a few hundred metres away from us because we kept our distance. But yeah, seeing it feed and watching all like the gannets come in and diving around where the minke whale was feeding, that was incredible to see. My latest trip to Mull was back in February of 2019. So there was no puffins this time because they would obviously be out at the sea during the winter months. But we still managed to explore a whole lot more of the island. Again, we had our own transport. And this time around, me and my partner went on a tour with the group Nature Scotland. And we met up with one of the tour managers, Ewan Miles. And he provides bespoke wildlife tours across Mull. You can do private tours, you can do photography tours. Mainly wildlife based, but I believe they also offer walks where you can just admire the landscape, talk a bit about the history of the landscape, how it's formed over the thousands of years. And these tours will basically take you across the whole of the island, north to south, east to west. It can go anywhere. So with the help of Ewan's knowledge of the wildlife on the island, he drove us to different locations where we're able to see other birds such as great northern divers. The golden eagles were back. I also saw hen harriers for the first time, which was amazing to see them hunt. There was also small groups of red deer dotted across the whole island, and we even got the chance to see the otters. So if any of you know a lot about Mull, you'd know that the otters on the island are, despite being elusive, they are actually quite abundant. There isn't a place on the island where you wouldn't see an otter. It's just a case of being there at the right place and the right time. But yeah, the time I saw an otter, it was actually on a day where I wasn't on the tour with Ewan, but he recommended a place for us to visit. We didn't have time to do it on the tour, so he told us of this location and we visited it the next day, which happened to be my birthday. So we visited this location, we got out of our car, we got settled down, and within about 30 seconds of settling down, an otter appeared from the loch. It was feeding on all sorts of fish. And then when it came up to rest, it came upon like a disused pier, and it was on one of the legs, like just above the water surface. We watched it groom and then we watched it sleep. That was really good. It was a nice birthday treat for me as well. So for the first couple of visits to the Isle of Mull, I wasn't solely focused on my photography, purely because I just wanted to go there to explore and see what this island was all about. And over the next couple of times, I'd obviously have my camera, but then when I got the chance to, I'd go and seek out the wildlife that I wanted to find and photograph. And as I think ahead about going back to the Isle of Mull, since then I've learnt an awful lot more about the species that are on the island, and also my camera techniques. I've even got my hide, which fingers crossed I can take with me and use on the island, especially if I want to get, for example, closer shots of the otter without too much disturbance. So fingers crossed, I am hoping to return this summer for quite an extended period of time, about 2 or 3 weeks, not just for the photography or the wildlife, but me and my partner, we are also hopefully going to get married on the island as well. So this place is definitely something that is quite close to our hearts. Like I said, it's a home away from home. There's always something to do, always something to find, and there's just personal memories that connect us to the Isle of Mull quite strongly, which is why I hope to return again at least every other year, if not every year. It's just a place you can go to any month of the year, even in the winter time when we went in February. The landscape, it was amazing to see. Obviously the otters are there all year round, and then in the summer months you obviously get the puffins. You also get the basking sharks, again another species I hope to find if I go in the summer. So yeah, it's definitely a location that for so many reasons I absolutely love. I'm sure a lot of either you listeners and other people I know who have visited the Isle of Mull would say that it's definitely one of the jewels off the west coast of Scotland. And yeah, I'm just really hoping with travel restrictions coming up, especially after spring, that we can go. And I've definitely got more ideas in place of what I want to photograph. So as I've mentioned before, I obviously want to convey a story within my images rather than just pointing and shooting. So yeah, I've definitely got ideas of what photos I want to get if I do go again, and the fact that we obviously plan to get married there as well. So yeah, it's Isle of Mull is just a place that I absolutely love going to. There's still so much more that I want to find on the island, and despite obviously loving the place in which I live, I just hope that I can keep returning to the Isle of Mull, not just obviously for the wildlife that I hope to photograph there, but also that it's a place of great personal importance to me, and it is, yeah, it's just a wonderful place. I don't really have any other words to say about it. So if you want to find out more about the Isle of Mull, obviously you can search for it online. Tobermory actually has its own website, which contains all the information regarding what's in the town, the attractions you can visit across the whole of Mull, and also accommodation. There's an awful lot of like self-catered places you can stay at. There's a caravan park, there's a camping site. So it's ideal for anyone, basically, whether you want to go as a family to do a camping trip together, if you're solo and you want a place of your own. There's an awful lot of places. Oh, that red kite is right over my garden again. Oh, wow, it's very close. Sorry, I get distracted by birds wherever I'm at. Apologies for that. Basically the island can be catered for anyone. You've got the flat sands of Calgary Bay in the north. You can climb up, I believe it's Benmore, which is one of the highest points on the Isle of Mull. You can do absolutely anything you can think of on the island. There's even a distillery, which my partner is really happy about. That is right in the Tobermory town centre. So, yeah, I would definitely recommend it. Put it on your list of places to visit. I think it is world renowned just for its beauty, not just the Isle of Mull, but the inner and outer Hebrides itself. There's also quite a few celebrities that do documentaries on some of the islands within the inner Hebrides and the outer Hebrides. So, yeah, it's definitely a place that anyone can visit, and there is definitely something that anyone will enjoy. So that was just my recount of my trips to the Isle of Mull. I'm sorry for the interruption of the red kite. Where I'm sitting, I look out of my window that backs onto my garden and to the open field behind. It came up right in view of the window, and it was just so close, just circling around. So that was really fun to see. But again, apologies for the interruptions. That sort of rounds off recounting my trips to the Isle of Mull. I hope that you enjoyed it. If any of you listeners have any memories of visiting either the Isle of Mull or any of the other islands around the Hebrides, I would love to hear them. As always, you can message me through my social media pages of Pinfold Photographic. Just either send me a private message on there or leave a comment on one of my posts. Thank you all again for listening. I do really enjoy recounting my wildlife trips and stories to you. Obviously, I don't know when I'd be comfortable to go out with my camera again, as I'm sure quite a few other people will feel the same. So I'll continue to think of other stories to talk to you guys about. And as always, I will speak to you all again in the near future. Goodbye. My podcast cover shows my own image created using Canva. The theme music is provided by Purple Planet Music. Check out their royalty-free music at purple-planet.com.